"You can't escape, Safina," one of her stepbrothers roared behind her. She glanced back. They were getting closer, their faces twisted with anger, their powerful tails thrashing the water violently. They wanted her dead. If they caught her, she would never make it to her coronation. Her father's throne would be stolen forever. Her breath came in gasps as she pushed forward, her arms cutting through the water with desperate speed. She needed to hide, fast. Then, just ahead on the riverbank, she spotted a clay pot sitting beside the water. Safina didn't think. She dived straight in, her heart pounding, unaware she had just gone from one danger to another. I dragged my feet along the dusty village path, my clay pot balanced on my hip. I kicked a small stone as I walked, my face squeezed in frustration. "At least let me go to the river to swim," I muttered. "I don't think I'll come back early. I need to rest, far away from Grandma's shouting and endless errands." I sighed loudly and shook my head. "Ayo, why did you do this? Ayo, why did you do that?" I mimicked my grandmother's voice, rolling my eyes. "She never stops. I just need some peace." The river was my only escape. There, no one would call my name 100 times in 1 minute. No one would ask me to fetch firewood or sweep the compound. It was just me and the cool water. When I reached the riverbank, I dropped my pot with a soft thud, removed my shirt, and stretched my arms. Then, with a wide grin, I ran forward and dived into the river. The water welcomed me, cool and refreshing. I swam back and forth, flipping and twirling like a happy fish. Floating on my back, I looked up at the bright blue sky and sighed. "This is the life," I whispered to myself. But while I enjoyed my swimming, something else was happening in the deep part of the river. Safina, the little mermaid, was swimming as fast as she could. Her small heart pounded in her chest, her tail moving swiftly through the water. She kept looking over her shoulder, fear written all over her face. They were coming. 3 small but fierce-looking mermen chased after her, their sharp eyes glowing with anger, their faces squeezed like they had just sucked on bitter fruit. "She must not escape," one of them shouted. Safina's tiny hands clenched into fists as she pushed herself forward. "I need to hide, I need to survive," she whispered. Then she saw it, a large clay pot sat by the riverbank. Without thinking, she swam toward it, squeezed herself inside, and curled up at the bottom. She pressed her hands over her mouth, trying not to make a sound. Her little body trembled. The mermen stopped nearby, their sharp eyes scanning the river. "Where is she?" one asked, his voice rough. "Keep looking." "She couldn't have gone far," another ordered. They swam around, searching every corner. Safina's heartbeat was so fast she thought they would hear it. But after a while, the mermen gave up. "She's gone. Let's go back," one of them grumbled. And just like that, they swam away. Safina let out a slow breath, her hands still shaking. She had escaped, or so she thought. Before she could even think of leaving her hiding spot, the pot suddenly lifted off the ground. Feeling refreshed and happy, I grabbed my pot without looking inside. I adjusted it on the ground and bent down to fetch water. Safina's eyes widened as cold water splashed over her. She almost gasped but quickly covered her mouth. "What's happening? Who is carrying the pot?" She looked up and gasped, her eyes popping. "A human," she exclaimed softly, shrinking herself down until she was small enough to stay hidden. Her magic made her light as air, invisible to human senses. I filled the pot and carefully balanced it on my head. Whistling a tune, I started walking home, unaware that I had just carried something magical with me. I walked along the narrow bush path, the heavy pot of water balanced carefully on my head. The sun was setting, but I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about the peace I had enjoyed at the river. "If only I could stay there forever," I muttered. The evening breeze cooled my skin as I stepped over dried leaves. But just as I was about to adjust the pot on my head, something strange happened. Safina, the little mermaid, finally gathered the courage to look outside. A tiny head with long, dripping hair slowly peeked out from inside the pot. Large, frightened eyes darted around, scanning the unfamiliar surroundings. Her heart pounded as she saw trees, bushes, and a dusty path stretching ahead. Everything looked so different from the underwater world she knew. She was terrified, yet curious. Then, before she could stop herself, she let out a shaky whisper. "Help." I froze. My eyes widened as my feet came to an abrupt stop. What was that? I whispered. I looked around, turning my head from left to right. The bushes swayed gently in the wind, but there was no one in sight. Maybe I imagined it, I muttered, shaking my head. I adjusted the pot on my head and continued walking, but my heart beat faster. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was strange inside the pot.
Safina swallowed hard. Should I jump out? She wondered.
What if he throws me away? She gripped the edge of the pot, thinking. But just as she was about to decide, something caught her eye. In the distance, huts, people, children playing. Her breath stopped. It was the village. Panic shot through her, and without thinking, she slipped back into the water, her tiny body trembling. I can't let them see me, she whispered. I entered the village, greeting a few people along the way. I carefully made my way to the small kitchen hut at the back of our compound. The moment I stepped inside, I lowered the pot to the ground with a relieved sigh.
Finally, I breathed.
But before I could turn around, something happened that made my blood run cold. A head popped out of the water. A real, living head with long wet hair and wide blinking eyes. My heart almost jumped out of my chest. My mouth opened to scream, but my hands flew up and covered it just in time. My body stiffened as I took slow, shaky steps backward. My voice came out in a hushed, trembling whisper. What are you? Safina, realizing how scared I was, quickly raised her hands. Please don't scream, she pleaded, her eyes filled with desperation. I need your help. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Some of the story Grandma told me flashed through my mind, her warnings about river spirits, creatures that lured people to their doom. She hated anything strange or unnatural. She said such things were curses sent to test our faith. If she ever saw what was standing before me now, she'd drive it out with fire and salt. My mind spun. I stammered, still staring at her in shock.
Safina swallowed hard.
Yes, please. She took a deep breath and then, in a soft voice, explained everything. She told me how she had been swimming in the river when she was suddenly chased by her stepbrothers. She told me how they wanted her dead because, after the king of the river, their father, died, she had been chosen as the new queen instead of her stepbrother. They don't want me to rule, she said, her voice shaking. They want to get rid of me before my coronation tomorrow. I listened, my heart still pounding, but now it was for a different reason. So you hid in my pot? I asked, still trying to process everything.
Safina nodded. I had no choice, she whispered. I ran a hand over my head, trying to think.
This is quite difficult, I muttered under my breath.
Just then, creak.
The kitchen door swung open. I turned sharply, my heart stopping. It was Grandma. Safina gasped and instantly ducked back into the pot, disappearing beneath the water. I stood frozen, my face turning pale. Grandma's sharp eyes locked onto me. Ayo, she barked, her voice loud and full of anger. My whole body tensed. Yes, Grandma, I stammered, trying to sound normal. Grandma stomped into the kitchen, her hands on her waist.
Where have you been? She demanded. Do you know how long you stayed at the river?
Do you think this house will clean itself? Do you think food will cook itself? I swallowed, forcing a nervous smile. I'm sorry, Grandma, I said quickly. I lost track of time. But Grandma wasn't satisfied. She marched forward, grabbed my ear, and twisted it. Ah! I yelped, jumping on my toes. You are becoming very stubborn, Ayo.
Grandma thundered.
The next time you stay out this long, you will sleep outside. I won't do it again, Grandma. I promise. I cried. Grandma eyed me suspiciously, then finally let go of my ear. Humph, she huffed. She scanned the room one last time, then turned on her heel and stormed out. The moment she left, I let out a loud sigh of relief. I rubbed my ear, wincing. She almost caught you, I whispered. Slowly, Safina peeked out again. Is she gone? She whispered. I nodded. Safina let out a small breath, but the fear in her eyes remained. Please, she whispered, I need to get back home before it's too late. I looked at her, then at the pot, then at the door where Grandma had just left. My mind was racing, a mermaid, a real mermaid, and she needed my help. But how? What was I supposed to do now? I glanced toward the kitchen door again. My grandmother could return at any moment, and if she saw the mermaid, there would be trouble. I had to hide her somewhere before she came back. Just hold on, I whispered to Safina. I'll find a better place to hide you. Safina nodded nervously and slipped back into the pot. I tiptoed out of the kitchen, careful not to make any noise. My heart pounded as I sneaked into my grandmother's room. A dim lantern shone in the corner, reflecting shadows on the walls. My eyes darted around, searching for something, anything big enough to hide Safina. Then I saw it, my grandmother's old woven basket. It was big enough to fit a small girl like Safina, and it had a lid. This will do, I thought. I quickly grabbed the basket and hurried back to the kitchen. I hoped my grandmother wouldn't notice it was missing. Safina peeked out of the pot again as I entered. Come, I'll hide you in this, I whispered. She hesitated but saw the worry in my eyes. Without another word, she climbed out of the pot, dripping wet, and into the basket. Her little body curled up inside, and I gently placed the lid over her. I'll help you get back home, I promised. Safina's voice was soft inside the basket. Thank you so much. I sighed and wiped my forehead. I had to act fast. I carefully lifted the basket and carried it to my small room. My mat was spread on the floor in the corner, and a tiny wooden stool sat beside it. I placed the basket next to the stool. Stay inside for now, I whispered. I'll take you back to the river as soon as I can. Safina nodded, though she was hidden inside. I hurried back outside before my grandmother started asking questions. But my plan didn't work out as I had hoped. Every time I tried to sneak out, my grandmother called me. Ayo, fetch firewood. Ayo, wash these plates. Ayo, where's that broom? Her voice seemed to be everywhere. I couldn't leave the house without making her suspicious. The sun went down, and the sky turned dark. The night breeze was cool, carrying the sounds of crickets and distant voices from the village square. I sighed as I realized I had failed. I couldn't take Safina home that night. After dinner, I carried my plate of food to my room. I closed the door behind me and sat cross-legged before the basket. Hey, I whispered slowly. The lid lifted, and Safina's little face appeared, her wet hair sticking to her cheeks. I pushed my plate toward her. Do you want some food? She shook her head. I don't eat human food, she said softly. I frowned. So what do you eat? Sea plants, things from the river. I scratched my head. Oh, I don't have any of that. It's okay, she said with a faint smile. I'll be fine. I felt bad. I wanted to help, but I didn't know how. I sighed. I'm sorry I couldn't take you home today. My grandmother wouldn't stop calling me. You tried, she said gently. I hesitated, then frowned a little. But something's been bothering me. How come I didn't feel you in the pot earlier? And even when I carried the basket here, it didn't feel heavy at all. Safina smiled slightly. That's one of our gifts. We can shrink our bodies and make ourselves light enough that no one can sense us, not even in their hands. It's how we stay safe when hiding from danger. I nodded slowly, impressed. So that's how you managed to stay hidden all along. She gave a tiny nod. Yes. If I hadn't, you would have known I was there the moment you lifted the pot. There was a small silence between us before Safina asked, "What's your name?" Ayo, I replied. Ayo, she repeated softly. I like it. I smiled. And your name? Safina. Safina, I repeated, rolling the name on my tongue. That's beautiful. Safina gave me a small, grateful smile. Then she hesitated before asking, that old woman, is she your mother? My smile faded. I lowered my eyes and shook my head. No. She's my father's mother, my grandmother. Then where's your mother? I sighed. She left when I was little, I said quietly. I don't know where she went. My father brought me to my grandmother, and she's been taking care of me ever since. Safina's face softened. I'm sorry, Ayo. I shrugged. It's okay. I don't even remember her, I said quietly. I think that's why Grandma is always so hard on me. My mother left, my father never comes back to check on us, it's like she's angry at the whole world for being left alone. She shouts a lot, but I think she's just scared of losing the only person she has left. Safina's voice softened. Maybe she just loves you too much to show it the right way.
Maybe, I murmured.
You know, she said after a pause, my mother left me too when I was very little, but it was death who took her away. My father remarried, but his wife.
She shook her head and shrugged her shoulders.
I'd rather not talk about it. Even though she and her children never liked me, it's okay, she said with a sad smile.
I'm sorry, I whispered.
No, it's okay, replied Safina. Another silence passed between us. The night air was cool, and the only sound was the distant hoot of an owl. I lay down on my mat, turning toward the basket. Tomorrow, I'll wake up early and take you home before Grandma wakes up, I promised.
Safina smiled.
Good night, Ayo. Good night, Safina. I closed my eyes, feeling strangely at peace. Safina curled inside the basket and also closed her eyes, feeling safer than she had all day. The night passed in quiet stillness. But when I woke up the next morning, the basket was gone. I jolted up from my mat, my heart pounding. I rubbed my eyes, hoping I was just dreaming, but no, the space where I had placed the basket last night was empty.
Safina was missing.
I jumped to my feet, looking around frantically. I checked under my mat, behind the wooden stool, and even peeked outside the hut. Nothing.
Where could it be?
Where could she be?
I muttered, scratching my head.
Then a terrifying thought struck me. Grandma. I tiptoed toward my grandmother's room, my heart hammering in my chest. I pushed the door open slightly, but she wasn't there. My breath caught in my throat.
If she's not here, then where?
Just then, I heard voices outside, lots of them.
My stomach dropped.
It was a market day. My eyes widened in realization. Grandma must have taken the basket to the market. Without wasting another second, I darted out of the hut, my feet kicking up dust as I ran. I ran past the village square, past the palm trees, and past the children playing by the roadside. My chest ached and my legs felt heavy, but I didn't stop.
Up ahead, I saw her.
My grandmother, walking slowly and balancing the basket on her head.
My heart pounded even harder.
What if she opens it? What if she saw her? I didn't want to imagine what would happen if she found a mermaid inside her basket. Grandma. I called breathlessly, running up to her. The old woman turned, her face full of confusion. Ayo, what are you doing here? She asked, frowning. I bent over, panting, sweat dripping down my face. I wanted to help you, I blurted out. My grandmother raised an eyebrow. Help me? She repeated suspiciously. Yes, Grandma.
The basket looks heavy.
Let me carry it for you. She studied my face for a moment. My heart was beating so loudly I thought she could hear it. Finally, she sighed and handed me the basket. Fine. But if you drop it, I will skin you alive. I nodded quickly, gripping the basket tightly. I won't drop it, Grandma. I promise. The moment I had the basket in my hands, I let out a shaky breath of relief. Now I just had to find a way to get Safina out. We reached the busy marketplace filled with women selling yams, vegetables, and fish. The air smelled of cooked food, and the sound of traders shouting filled my ears. Suddenly, my grandmother stopped at a stall to buy some cassava flour. I knew this was my chance. Carefully, I dropped the basket and lifted the lid slightly.
Inside, Safina was curled up, looking scared.
We're almost there, I whispered.
She nodded.
I glanced at my grandmother, her back was still turned. With shaking hands, I reached into the basket and gently pulled Safina out. She was small enough to hide behind me. My heart was racing. Then, without warning, I dropped the basket on the ground. Oh no! I shouted, pretending to panic.
My grandmother spun around.
You foolish boy, she yelled. But before she could grab me, I ran. I sprinted through the market, my legs moving as fast as they could. Ayo, come back here. My grandmother's voice roared behind me, but I didn't stop. Safina clung to my back, her tiny hands gripping my shirt as I ran past confused villagers. The moment we reached the path leading to the river, I finally stopped. My chest rose and fell as I gasped for air, my knees felt weak. Safina dropped from my back and looked at me with grateful eyes. Please help me, she pleaded. Today was supposed to be my coronation. I wiped my sweaty face and nodded. I'll try my best. Without wasting any more time, I grabbed Safina and took her to the riverbank. The sun was beginning to rise higher in the sky, making the water sparkle. Safina turned to me, her big watery eyes filled with gratitude.
Thank you, Ao, she whispered. I smiled.
Go and be a queen, I said in a warm voice. But what about your stepbrothers? Won't they come for you again? Well, if that is my fate, then so be it, she replied. Then she paused, reaching gently to her back, and brought out a small white shell, glowing faintly like the moonlight on water. Take this, she said, placing it carefully in my hand. If ever you are in danger, or if your heart grows heavy, drop this shell into the river and call my name. I will hear you, no matter how far I am. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The shell pulsed softly in my palm, warm like it was alive. She took one last look at me before turning and diving into the water. She swam with incredible speed, her tail flashing beneath the surface. I will reward you greatly when I become queen, she screamed. I watched until she disappeared into the deep blue river.
I sighed with relief. But then I remembered something.
Grandma.
My heart nearly stopped.
I had just abandoned her in the middle of the market, and worse, I had also dropped the basket and ran away. Oh no, I muttered, my stomach twisting with fear. I turned and ran home as fast as I could. As I reached the village, I could already hear my grandmother's voice from afar. Ao. My legs wobbled. I took a deep breath and stepped into the compound. My grandmother stood there, hands on her hips, eyes blazing.
Where have you been?
I scratched my head, looking down at my feet. I
had no excuse.
My grandmother marched toward me, but before she could grab my ear, I ran into my room. The next morning, I was sweeping the compound while my grandmother was passing by before me when all of a sudden, she froze. I followed her gaze and turned around. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. There, standing near the wooden gate, was a small wooden chest.
It wasn't there before.
My grandmother hesitated before stepping forward and opening it. Inside, it was filled with shining gold coins and precious stones.
Her eyes widened in shock. Where did this come from?
My lips parted slightly. I knew. Safina, I whispered to myself. My grandmother turned to me. Ao, what is this?
I just smiled.
A gift, Grandma. For the first time ever, she didn't scold or complain. She just stood there, speechless, her eyes glimmering in disbelief. I could see something soften in her face, something I had never seen before. I looked up at the sky, grinning. Somewhere beyond the river, a little mermaid had become queen. And me, the boy who once wished to escape everything, I had just become the luckiest boy in the village.